Hello, Trevor.
Hey, Jeff.
Welcome back.
Thanks, man.
I'm back too. I guess we're both back.
That's right. That's right. You've been on a dry spell.
Yeah. My wife and I've been, as you well know, been picking up the disc golf, and so she's been enthusiastic. I've been enthusiastic, and two people in their mid-50s who actually enjoy gallivanting around the countryside, throwing pieces of plastic at metal chains on poles. I guess you just need to make the best of it while you can.
Well, you never know what winter's going to look like, and I mean, I was hearing predictions that it's going to be potentially kind of a mild winter for us here, and I think in your neck of the woods too. But you never know. I mean, by January we could be 2 feet deep in snow.
Well, yeah, that is true. We don't normally get too bad. Usually it lasts for a little while and goes away. But I also know that I think my wife is a little bit competitive. She enjoys sports. I've never been much of a sports person, except more individual stuff. So this is really kind of fit a good spot. But stay active while we can, because there's as I've like we went to a tournament and they had mixed couples, and there's 8 couples. I think the next youngest, they were 15 years younger than we were, and everybody else was even younger than that. So
Yep.
it's like,
Understandable.
yeah. And then look at their scores. Like I've come to realize I can improve, but I realize there's a barrier that this 50-some-year-old body can actually cross. So just do the best of what I can.
Well, and the question would be: is it really about the sport, or is it really about the exercise and getting out and spending time with your wife?
Well, the main thing really is improving. And I think a lot of courses, the more simple courses, they have pars that are generally reasonable. And it's a good thing to try and aim at,
I see.
It's really, to me, well, here's what's kind of interesting, is because a lot of times you can make improvements, but won't improve your score. So it's probably like a lot of things. You need to pick things that you are improving on, even if it doesn't show up in the score. Like, are you doing better your approaches? Are you getting putts further away? Are you, those types of things? So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
so an increment of 20 foot on a drive may not be a lot, but still an increase of 20 feet. And, later on, eventually it'll all add up. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, cool.
it is definitely for anybody interested. That is definitely it's an easy sport to be involved in that takes a minimal amount of money to play.
I mean, frisbees can't be all that expensive, right?
Well, this is the dark thing about disc golf, is that you can spend $10 for a reasonable disc. They run between 10 and 15, sometimes up to 20, depends on the plastic, but they all have different characteristics. They come in different weights. They have different flight characteristics. So you can easily start finding yourself like any other thing that only costs like 10 or $15 or even $20. I get a couple here, try this one out, try a few here. Wonder what this would be like in a different plastic. I wonder if I just bought this at 10 grams lower weight, if that would make an improvement.
You should really just buy the lightest one and just tape pennies to the underside of it.
That's the other thing I thought about is, you could also adhere weights, and, what sort of effects would it have to, if you start playing around with the balance of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting. If you ever want to get interested in the whole physics, there's a lot of weird physics that goes on with these discs. I don't fully understand why one would be biased to the left, the other would be biased to the right, just kind of based on where that parting line is in relation to the top. But it does. It's strange. But anyway, enough of that. People, this is not RPG disc throwing.
Disc rambling.
Disc rambling, yeah. So yeah, and I think for people maybe afraid, I don't know if anybody's afraid I was going to actually go dark or silent, but it's just
you could do disc golf live plays where you just basically rig yourselves up and they just can hear you mutter and everything.
Listen to me hit a tree. Whack.
Yep. Is that an alligator in that pond?
Watch me in real time walk through poison ivy and have my legs all.
Oh man, I was we cut 4 trees down on the north side of my house this spring, and I'm finally I let the wood age on the ground for a couple months in the height of summer. I didn't want to deal with it, And so we were clearing it out, and we have a small tractor and everything, and it's my job to roll logs into the tractor dump and everything. And I got poison ivy. What the weird thing was I got it on my face.
Ooh.
I was bending over, and it's in a poison ivy vine flicked up across my face. And I'm like, I immediately went in, washed off my face, and everything. And where does it show up? It shows up on my arm. Now it's better now. You can barely see that I had it, but just before Gamehole Con, this was just all red and enraged and everything and stuff. And it took about a month to go away. It was actually quite nasty, and it kept getting little like, and they're not really blisters, but just little, you've had poison ivy, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple times this year.
Yeah. So I'm constantly amazed because I didn't really used to be affected by it, but this was different. And then I was fairly certain I hadn't got it on my arms, and I'd gotten it on my face, and my face was fine, but my arm is what, and it gets into your circulatory system and it just pops out wherever.
I did not know that.
Yes. Oh yeah. It can go septic. My mother-in-law got it, and she looked like a mummy. She was wrapped, just everything was loosely wrapped. It was just all poison ivy everywhere for about 6 months. So yeah.
So I've had it bad in the past, and I also was very adamant that I was going to wear shorts. And I spent a lot of time in the woods, unfortunately. That's not where you're supposed to throw your discs, but
that's where they go.
Yes, and I realized, I guess looking down, I know what poison ivy looks like, and I can also tell the leaves of three things kind of have that waxy look. But there's a certain point where you're like, it is what it is, and I'm just thankful it wasn't worse than it was.
I mean, think of it as a metaphor for your games.
Yes, yes.
For players, and you're the GM, and they just go where they want to go, no matter how well you throw them.
Yes, sometimes you have beautiful mistakes. Sometimes you have the most beautiful throw, and then it hits a tree 10 foot in front of you.
Yep.
And you're like, wow, if it only wasn't for that tree.
Is that true? Who put that there?
If I didn't put that ogre right there, I wouldn't have had a total party kill.
That's right.
Yeah. So anywho, I've got stuff still going. I've got a Kickstarter. I should be the next Gary's Appendix. I think I'm going to Kickstarter here maybe in a couple weeks.
Sweet. That's number 5, right?
That is it's number 4.
Yep. That's good. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. It's a Sword and Sorcery edition. So we got some pretty fun articles. So
that's great.
So things are still happening, even though the podcast was the first one to give. But
things come and go. You do what you do. It's I'm sure that I'm supposed to be working on a winter house renovation, and I'm beginning to ramp up for it. And so sometime like January, February, March.
Now, when you say a winter house, are you saying
winter? I don't have a winter house.
Okay.
I have a winter seasonal. This winter I will be renovating the house.
Oh, okay.
And so and I'm gearing up for the work as we move towards winter, because it's all internal. I'm gutting a kitchen and rebuilding it, and a bathroom.
Whoa.
That's nothing.
That sounds expensive.
I've been working towards it for years. So I buy bits. I kind of have an idea of where we're going, and we've already bought sinks and faucets, and I get all of that stuff kind of purchased. That's building up to it is what that is. And
that does, if you've got space and you're a disciplined person and not just a person that just collects stuff thinking they'll use it someday, that is a smart way of doing it, because you can find faucets probably occasionally like, yeah, I want those faucets, or
well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, like we right at the beginning of COVID, we have like a billionaire area of town in Cincinnati. It's called Indian Hills, and as COVID hit, a whole bunch of house renovations spiked in Indian Hills, and they were tearing out kitchens. Now, this is not a kitchen probably like you and I are used to. This is a kitchen that's like a 2,500 square foot kitchens that we're talking about here, right? I mean, there were just hundreds and hundreds of cabinets and everything and stuff. And so they were in great condition. They're dovetail joinery, really high-end slides, the best woods and everything, but they're tearing them out and they're putting in something better, something more expensive. And so each one of these cabinets is probably $2,000 to $3,000 a cabinet. We have 2 or 3 big reuse centers here, and millionaires donate their cabinets so they can take it as a tax write-off, and instead of just throwing it in a dumpster. And so they would literally get, like, 2/3 of a kitchen that's in pristine condition, and that's enough kitchen for you and I for like 2 or 3 kitchens.
You're right.
And so we had a friend who had just purchased a house actually about a mile from us, and one day she comes over really excited and she's like, check out these kitchen cabinets. And she knew we were thinking about renovating, and it turned out that there was enough kitchen cabinets that we could chip in together, buy them as a lot, and actually get both of our kitchens done. And that's how many sink cabinets there were, right? They had like 5 sink cabinets and stuff like this. It was crazy. I don't know why you need 5 sinks in a kitchen, but you might. And so we were able to get that. So like I've had the brand new top of the line handmade cabinets in storage in a garage for like 3 years now. So
Well, I'm trying to think.
It's a long-term plan.
So there's a category that we can't comprehend, of richness that we cannot comprehend.
That's right. And this is it.
You would say, to them, I have no, if you were to meet the person that owned the house, you say, I have no idea. Why would you need five sinks? Well, of course I need 5 sinks. Whenever we host parties, I need 5 sinks to keep the hors d'oeuvres going, right. Whatever going, is going.
There's a clam, island with all the ice and the clams are just open on it. Those things are reality for people that are beyond our means.
Yes.
But it turns out that you too can have super really nice cabinets when the ultra rich and wealthy give theirs away. So, and they're immaculate. They look better than something I could buy at a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something, right? They're built to last. They'll never fall apart as long as I don't have a leaky roof. So,
yes. Well, and it's also, you got a story now because now you share cabinets with a friend of yours.
That's right. Within a mile of us, right?
Yeah, there's a narrative now that's built into this.
And the same thing is true. So like Friday, I go to meet the local farmer who's just around the corner, actually between me and my friend. And he cuts wood all winter. That's his hobby. He plows and reaps things and everything and harvests stuff all summer. And he tags trees he doesn't like that are in his way. And then all winter he cuts them down. And then he has a buddy with a sawmill, and they saw them, and then they sit in these barns in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, for years. And there'll be a stack of black walnut, and nobody knows about it because he doesn't advertise. You just have to know him.
Right.
And so I'm going to go over there and look at some black walnut on Friday, and probably buy a whole bunch of black walnut to hand make the countertop. And so on at least part of the kitchen, I'll have black walnut countertops. So. Yeah. So, but I can buy from him barn aged black walnut. As a matter of fact, the desk I'm sitting at right now is barn aged ash from my farmer. That cost me 70 cents a linear foot, or was 70 cents a board foot, and it would have cost me $10-15 a board foot from a kiln place. So.
Yeah,
make it cheap.
If you got the time and the place and the connections and the space, you can make it all work out.
And the carpentry tools, and I have all the carpentry tools, so that's not a problem.
So. Yeah, and some of that stuff, I mean, it does take a bit of a knack, especially dealing with cabinets and such. But they're already built though, so it's probably not quite so bad.
It's about leveling,
yeah.
And so and leveling is just about shims and a really nice level. And I have plenty of shims, and I have a level. So once we get the floors in, or once I tear everything out and redo some plumbing and stuff and fix everything, we'll get it going.
So what are you doing with so what are you going to do about your flooring for the kitchen?
Well, the kitchen, so my house is a very extensive redo anyway. And so the kitchen has the original flooring in it. That'll all get torn out. I'll put I will then cut the floor, put shift the lines a little bit, because as my plumber put it when I started renovating the house, you don't rebuild a 50-year-old body and then not rework their plumbing. So you need to, so I'm upgrading all the plumbing at the same time. And so we'll lay in the new plumbing for where it's supposed to go. And then I will build what's called a, I've lost the word. You build little walls. That's how they are. They're little walls. They're called sisters, I think is how we refer to them here locally. And so you put in these little, basically 2x4s that are all custom leveled, with little shims and stuff, and everything. And you build a subfloor that way, and then you lay plywood and other material on top of it. So, yeah. So what the final height needs to be, because I have just outside in the dining room, the great room is right next to the kitchen, and I know what the final height needs to be, and all I have to do is work backwards with my dimensions. It's like I know a 2x4 is 1.5 inches thick, and I know that the plywood is 34/36 of an inch or whatever it is, and so you just do the math,
Right.
And then I've got to shim it to this height, and then everything sits perfectly.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that extensive.
Sleepers.
I'm trying to think.
They're called sleepers.
What's it?
They're called sleepers. The little trusses that you put underneath the floor. They're called sleepers. Sorry.
Yeah.
I knew it would come to me. I just haven't done a lot of woodworking in a while. But my entire house is on sleepers, because this was originally a chicken coop when I bought it. I didn't know that until about an hour after I signed the paperwork that the house was a chicken coop. In the 1940s, this was the chicken coop for the farm, for all the farmland around here. And in the 40s, they had a need, 30s and 40s, they had a need for itinerant labor. And so they took the chicken coop and converted it to itinerant labor housing. And as a matter of fact, I don't have it. I can't go grab it right now easily. But when we were renovating the house, we basically built walls and an extension, and then scissor trussed over the existing house, demolished the house while we were living in it, and then built the new parts and married it all together. This is a 10-year project. It's been 10 years since I've been working.
Right. It's still going on.
It's still going on. This is the last bit, though. The kitchen and the bathrooms are the last thing. I have less than 10 linear feet of outside wall that's original to the house. I have replaced everything. So little bits at a time, as I move through rooms and everything, I have replaced and upgraded the foundation and done everything. So this is a good project. But yeah, so we found this board on the wall, and it was the original sketch that had like literally a box that says coop in it, right? And it's like, we're going to add these rooms to it, and that was it. That was the amount of planning that went into changing it to itinerant laborer housing. Was a sketch on a wall that they then plastered over. So when I tore the plaster down, I recovered the board, and actually it's my plan to when I'm done, to have that board framed, because I have it stored away somewhere, to have it framed nicely with a little plaque at the bottom that lists all the people that helped me renovate the house. So you'll come in and there'll be a picture of the house finished, and then the board, and then thank you and everything. Yeah,
it would be interesting to know the stories of the people that were the people that lived in this coop.
Yeah,
originally.
Yeah, it's a crazy history to a house that's only like less than 100 years old. And
right.
So,
it's not the kind of history you think of the house history just being of just individual families owning a house. Like, yeah, I built this house, me and Ma Kettle, and we had our kids and whatever, but it's like, no, it's much more than that.
Yeah. But we have rambled way off topic. My original point was that, like you, there are moments when you have dearths of rambling,
Yes.
and you're focused on something else. So I totally understand.
Yeah, it is, and I think it is a healthy thing to. I mean, I think for a lot of us who can hyper focus on things, it's probably best to occasionally aim that 10 gigawatt laser at something else rather than just burning a hole in the same thing all the time. So
Yeah.
and I think the thing too, it's like to me, there is inspiration, maybe not directly always, but it's kind of like now you telling me about this. Do you ever read the comics Kings in Disguise?
No, I've never even heard of them.
So Kings in Disguise came out in the 80s, and it was about it was during the 20s. The mother died, the father left to go get work, and these two boys went out to go find their father.
Okay.
And it wasn't, I mean, it's pretty tough. I mean, some of the stuff was good, some of the stuff was bad. And one guy thought he was a king of Spain, and I think he got away. He had tuberculosis, and they would boil. And he got real bad. Was it was it thistle or something? They would boil. It would like it's like a narcotic. It would help him with his cough, but it ended up just messing with his mind. So it was kind of
This is a comic. Okay.
yeah, Kings in Disguise. So anyway, but anyway, it just like looking at that, it's like, well, there's a bunch of stories there with that, like whatever that is. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. So, and same thing with whatever you're doing. It's kind of like with E.B. White. He his whole idea with being a writer is that he was asked during World War One, for what you did. He was known for being a writer, but I think he said that he put farmer because he had a small farm he wrote from. But he's like, you're not really a writer. You experience other things, and those things come out in your writing. Like it's, and I think sometimes too, it's our experiences that we see, people we come in contact with, books we read, movies we see, walks in the woods. Those are things that come out in, I think, the products that we produce.
Oh, I agree. Look at, Nick Barron did that product, Tragedy at Hillwood Rise or whatever it was. And that is, he said long and numerous times, he's like, that came about from a walk through like a city park, right?
Yeah.
He was going through this wooded area of a park. And whenever he needed inspiration for that product, he would go back out to that and he would walk back through there and check it out with his dog, right?
Go back to the well.
Go back to the well, right? Yeah, absolutely. No, you do. And I mean, all of our products are probably products of, I mean, they're imaginative, but they're products of things that we have been exposed to, whether we realize it or not at some level. So
It is impossible to divorce things that we think are creative from things that we've, it's like musicians. Like, are they really coming up with anything new? Probably not.
Well, Orson Scott Card wrote he wrote a short story about that, actually, where this person had been, it starts out and it's like this person has always been alone and they're administered by robots and they're in this dense forest. So they can't leave the forest, but there are musical instruments there, and they're taught, basically they're given instruction on how to play by the robots, but they're never allowed to listen to man-made music, right? And so, and then and they had handlers who would come and deal with them, and the handlers were always mute, and they never talked to them or anything and stuff. And the whole thing was that this society, whatever human society this was, something in the future or something, was attempting to create musical geniuses that were independent of the previous musical. They were non-influenced.
Right.
So this person had never heard Beethoven, they had never heard Bach, they had never heard Mozart. And as a matter of fact, the thread of the story is that a musician comes and plays Mozart or something in the woods and influences this person. So when they begin to compose and they pick up little pieces of Mozart, they know that this person has been damaged, right? That they're basically no longer pure. They're no longer a pure of themselves. They've been influenced by the outside world, and they hunt down the other person and do mean things to them. But but it was an interesting idea, that you really can't, but it was that influence that allowed that person to create more, right?
Right.
To create better. And that's not far off of what when we did the very first Tales from the Smoking Wyrm, we wrote an essay, or I wrote an essay in the back called On the Shoulder of Giants. And I was like, this is what that, talking about what that phrase meant and everything through the centuries and stuff. And the idea that, humanity is an accumulation. Culture is an accumulation of things. And it's a historical accumulation of stuff. And sometimes its origin is surprising.
Yeah,
So
I was listening to there's a absolutely phenomenal podcast about Dolly Parton put out by who put it out. It's like a multi-series, and then they were talking about country music and the banjo, and then there's a gal, I forget her name, but part of the Carolina Chocolate Drops talking about how it was an African instrument, but then she started tracing it back, and it really goes back way further than that. It's like a Middle Eastern, and talking about different vocalizations and things. They're like the calling or whatever. It actually goes back to like a Middle Eastern chant.
yeah,
And she talked about how people on ships traveling to wherever, like say coming to the US, different nationalities would come, be on a ship for however long, a month or 6 weeks or whatever it is,
Mhm.
play music together, sometimes even swap instruments.
Yeah,
But this sort of thing has been going on, for thousands of years. And we think that, Led Zeppelin comes out doing something new. Well, it's just derivative of the blues, which is derivative of this, which is derivative of that. And, next thing you're going back to, people around a campfire, 5,000 years ago, plucking away on a string. You
yeah,
first invented it. It's like, it's like,
yeah. So those are, yeah, those. I think what we do in life influences what we write. I completely agree with that. So certainly influences how I think.
yeah, it's impossible I mean, try and think anything's original, and that's why I think sometimes, um, I think the best thing we can do is produce something that's interesting, that's our take of something that's already probably a pastiche.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that.
just have fun with what you do, and if people like it, they'll buy it, and if they don't, well, it's still out there. You never know. Maybe it just hasn't found its audience.
Well, that's another thing. Before we do talk about Smoking Worm, there was a rant I was kind of wanting to do. Not really a rant, but
Okay.
I couldn't find the quote. There's a fellow on one of the forums who produces a lot of stuff on drive through. I won't say
Okay.
the system name, um, or who the person is, but he was complaining that his stuff wasn't getting the same recognition as other people. And he was also complaining that he puts out a lot of stuff, but people aren't talking about his stuff. And he was lamenting the fact that while these other people who produce the same sort of content get noticed and he doesn't. And but the same people who he was saying this about, they also were saying very positive things about his stuff. And this was the second time I've seen this person do a rant,
Hmm.
about that. And I started thinking about, like, and I never reached out to the guy, but while I was thinking, like, talking about, you were talking about recognition, or maybe you don't. It's like I started thinking, like, I think before we do anything in a creative space, you need to figure out, one is like, why are we doing this?
Yes.
Like, you really need to figure that out quick. Why are
What's
you doing this?
what is it a deep, does it fill a deep burning need in your soul, or is it for making money? And those two don't have to be separate. I break it down when I talk to new creators on the Scrivenery, which is the little Twitch show that I do with Ed Stanek on the Goodman Games channel. And it's all about writing, getting into and learning about how to write third-party products and independent publishing and stuff, right? And we always break it down into three categories. You're either a profit person, you're either a not profit person, or you're a passion person. And the truth is all of those things can be interlaced in the same product.
Oh,
Um,
wait a second. You got to pick two of the three. You can't have
no,
all three.
well, no. But
Or,
they can be. For instance, you look at Smoking Wyrm. Some people come and ask me to write, if they can write an article, and they're a passion project. That's a passion project for them, right? Whereas I may write things because I'm like, oh, this fills a void in the existing stuff that I know needs to be filled. It may not be something that I'm particularly wanting to use in my own game, um, but I just want to get it out there because I have an idea on how it might be executed well. And so that's probably a profit thing. And then sometimes I write things and I work on projects and I'm like, I just don't want to lose my shirt on this, and and And
Please,
so
Lord, don't make me let me lose my shirt on this.
don't just I don't want to have to explain to my wife why it is that we have to mortgage the house again. Right. But and those things can all be in the same product, depending on the type of product, right? Because my product is a whole bunch of different articles, all of
Right.
us have,
But
everybody on the
for
team.
individuals, but for you as a person producing it,
Yes,
you need to know why you're in this.
I absolutely know why I'm doing it.
Yes.
So,
And I think if anybody trying to strike out, they need to not lie to themselves. They can't say, I'm in it for this, but in the end, you're like, well, I'm not really in it for, I'm just doing it because I love it. But if you are going to complain because you're not getting the fanfare that your peers are, then you need to reevaluate. Well, maybe I do want the fanfare. You really just need to understand.
yeah, and who, I don't know, I didn't see the rant that you did. My feeling is that I think everybody feels like that person feels at some point, right? I think
Oh yeah,
everybody looks at their peers, and we have a group of peers, and you interview a lot of them on your show, right? We all look at them and we're like, oh, that guy or that girl, they're just doing way better than I am. And then you look at the product and maybe you go, well, that's not any better than my product,
yeah.
right? And
$25,000 Kickstarter,
and
boom, out of the sky.
right, whereas I'm like, I'm scratching at 2 or 3 or 4,000, right? And so this, I think it comes back to that thing of, you got to walk a mile in someone's shoes before you understand what's going on. And I kind of look at it and say, I have those feelings. I understand where those feelings come from, and I try and mitigate those feelings by being kind to other people and understanding that I don't know the whole story, and it's maybe we should just celebrate that we're putting things out there. And
Yes.
I had a struggle with a creative person very early on in this process that I've been doing Smoking Wyrm now for 4 years. And I had a talk with Joseph Goodman about it. And, I was all worked up and angry, and this person really made me very unhappy. And Joseph said, he's like, I find that karma kind of comes around, and that you will get your due as long as you just treat that person well and cut strings, right? He's like, if it's not a good relationship, treat them how you would want to be treated and move on. And he's like, it'll come back to reward you at some point. And I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow, is what he told me. He's like, but it'll, at some point, it'll come back to you. And I thought about that, and I was like, he's right. I just need to let go. I need to jettison those negative feelings, because the only person they hurt is me.
Right.
And I've been a much happier publisher since then. So, but it's good to have a bad experience under your belt, right?
Oh, I agree. And I think you're right, is to have the bad experiences. And I think also recognize, I think there's a lot of us that have not achieved what we really want to achieve. Yeah.
That's right. And so if you're in that place where you're having that rant, before you hit the send button, ask yourself, why the hell did I just write this? And why didn't I just put it in a journal that I could just close and put in the desk drawer? And then when I die, it'll go to some of my gaming friends, and you'll be, oh my God, he hated all of us throughout the years, right? But at least you'll be dead, and you won't have to deal with the fallout right then and there, because it can crash and burn you pretty quick.
And he is a well-loved individual in that community. And the people around him try to be supportive, but still, I'm like you. I normally don't, but maybe it's who we are. I tend to not broadcast my emotions in a big way to others in a public forum.
In a public forum. Yeah. A little bit of common courtesy goes a long way.
The other thing I was thinking too is about this is what does, you can have in your mind, like, what does winning look like?
Yes.
And going back to the disc golf thing, it's like I could be playing, and my improvement as a 56-year-old man is going to be I'm not going to be able to compete against a 24-year-old. There's no way. Absolutely no way.
I mean, not without a whole bunch of drugs.
Not unless I drug him.
Yeah. I mean, the drugs go either
Yeah.
way, but sure.
Yeah. But the thing is I can't, my definition of winning can't be, I can compete with a 25-year-old. That is unrealistic.
Right.
But I got to find things. What does it mean for winning? Because the thing is, there are things I can win at, and they just have to be defined. So I, in my mind, have to structure what winning looks like in publishing or writing or whatever it is I'm doing, and then look for those things and celebrate when I achieve those more modest milestones.
Yeah, absolutely. And just be honest with yourself. You know, if that's a goal, right? You want fame and prestige, and you want to hang out with all the cool kids, then that's a goal. And okay, that's a goal. You know, that's I don't know that that's any less reasonable than I want to own a Ferrari,
Right.
or any less reasonable than I want to have a $50,000 Kickstarter. Personally, you know, the level of Kickstarters I have are about what I can handle at the volume that I handle them. And so maybe with some more experience, I can handle a bigger one. But I think there's sometimes a lot of downsides to something that explodes out of your control.
Oh yeah.
And then suddenly you're like, wow, this is gonna. Then you have to deliver the bad news, right? Your family or whoever else, which is, I am now going to have to change what we're doing because, you know, if I don't spend the money fast, I have to pay taxes on it. Or if I now I need
Oh
to buy
yes,
pallets and pallets and pallets of paper,
right.
right? Deal with
It's not
things.
affecting me this time, but I was talking to because I use World Game Design. Zach Goins is the main guy I work with for Kickstarters. I told him I want to do Gary's appendix. I said, but I want to both. I want, because it's 2 weeks after Kickstarter ends, you get paid. I'd rather have those revenues come in before the end of the year.
Yeah,
and then also order my books before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So then I'm
pay everybody and be done.
So
right?
Then I need to work backwards.
Yep.
Like, okay. But you need to understand what you're doing and what's winning, and not messing yourself up. But I think the other thing you mentioned too, I was thinking, is kind of like what you're saying, is I would say to this fellow who's complaining, but also to myself, you know, even to everyone out there, what are you doing besides writing or publishing to make you successful? By successful, I mean whatever you constitute as winning.
Yeah.
Because you can't just write and print a book and expect success.
No, and especially if the book is in some way different, right? And especially if it breaks norm. There is a form factor. Let me give you a good example of this for role-playing games. There's a form factor for what an adventure should look like. And there's a couple variants on that form factor, but they're basically the same, right? There's a description, there's some notes to the judge, there's some monsters or hazards or puzzles or traps or something. There's a reason for that room to exist. It might be tied in what we call an ecology,
Right.
to steal a word from biology. And all of that needs to be organized in a very systematic way. And a lot of that nomenclature goes all the way back to things like G1 or, the Palace of the Vampire Queen and things like that, right? It is literally unchanged since the 70s. It was established and its form, and there's been some tweaking, but yeah, if you're just producing another one of those, it's hard to stand out from the crowd. But at the same time, if you're producing something different, it's hard to get recognized,
right,
or explained. It's something like Steve Jobs talked about the fact, he's like, people don't know what it is that they want, and the reason they don't know what they want is because they can't conceive of it yet, because it doesn't exist. And if they could conceive of it, it would already exist, and they wouldn't want it, right?
And
I think he was talking about the iPhone and the iPad and things like this and everything. He's like, someone has to conceive of it. There is a de novo building. And as we mentioned, nothing's really de novo. I mean, frankly, iPhones and Apple Watches and everything look like they're out of the Jetsons from the 50s for a reason, right? And flip phones look like they're out of Star Trek for a reason.
Right.
But yeah, no, I agree. It's
But I was thinking too, it's like if this fellow's idea of winning was to have people like talk about his products and I don't think it was just buying, but at least get there. I was thinking, well, maybe he should be doing things like maybe he should be running a YouTube live plays using, things like that. Like you
people can
can't,
find him,
huh?
so people can find him.
Yeah.
Instead of being not well known, but one day you're traveling through Venice and you walk into a bookstore and there's this little English zine that has somehow made its way and it's shoved in between two other books and it falls out as you pick up the other book because you're looking at it, and then you're like, wow, what a treasure. It's a shame this guy didn't produce much because I didn't know he existed, but this is just gold, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those people exist, by the way, in role-playing games and in publishing from the 60s or for the 70s and 80s. Those types of products are out there. You just have to go look for them, and they're rare and they're expensive, or they're unknown. And so yeah, you could be that too. And
Yeah.
that's a way of winning, right?
Yeah.
Long
So
after you produced it, it becomes sought after.
and I think, but the thing is you can't. So I had a pastor friend of mine who came to a town and started a church, and it wasn't going well. His dad was helping him, wasn't going well, and then he was complaining to his dad. His dad said, "Well, nobody asked you to come here, and nobody asked you to write Tales of the Smoking Wyrm. Nobody's told me to write Fan of the Fly. Nobody's said we need you. There's no group of people that demanded this. We're out there just doing it,
Yeah.
And so there's a point where you get enough people, and then people do demand it. But starting out, there's nobody asking for it, and you need to realize that it's not. And that's where I've kind of felt this person's angst. I kind of felt a little bit of, because I produced product for a segment that I thought was underserved and I thought would actually be more supportive and would be more hubbub about, and absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
But I also had to tell myself they didn't ask me to write this.
That's right.
It's like
But in the end, that doesn't mean you don't write it. It just means it wasn't as well. It didn't do what you really wanted it to do, which was, maybe make a lot of money or something. Maybe
but the thing is, I expected to walk into town like a prophet and have everybody just welcome me like a savior. Oh, where have you been, Jeff? We've been looking for something like this for decades. So thank you, Jeff, for writing this. I was kind of expecting that without actually engaging in the community. So I also had to realize I just walked into to a place I didn't know anybody, announce I've got a product, and then I expect people to just say, yeah, Jeff, thank you very much. We're just so happy you did this. We can't wait to buy more of your product. That's pretty unrealistic on my part, but I did kind of think that way.
Yeah. Well, without even thinking
Yeah.
about what you were really, what was really going on, right?
Yeah. So I mean, realistically, if my idea of winning was to be more successful in that endeavor, I should have been engaging more heavily in that community long before I started putting out product.
Yeah. And you'd probably have been more successful.
Yeah.
Right? But I mean, the alternative to that is you engage with the community now. And
not really. I think a different community just came to me. I think some of that community came, but as far as the Facebook group, nobody.
Sure.
That's okay. It's okay. The other thing I was thinking too is ask yourself, what are other people doing? So this person was complaining he wasn't successful, but what he's doing is not the same level of production values, product types, marketing that these other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes if it's not working, you need to look around, because it's like other people are successful. Why are they successful?
Yep. Yep. Sometimes it is a flash in the pan. Sometimes it is just plain good old luck, which is really just the law of numbers. Everybody gets a little lucky now and then. And for people who use, chance cubes to determine the success and outcome of things, we should all understand that.
Chance cubes.
Yeah, dice in Star
Mhm.
Wars are called chance.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying.
Because George Lucas, I guess, couldn't say dice, just the dice. No, they're chance cubes, right? So, but yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's well earned,
Well,
and sometimes it grows on people. Sometimes that's a thing, you know.
like Hamilton. I think I'm going to go on a limb. Not that I've watched very many musicals, but I think that's probably one of the greatest feats of music put out in the last decade. Was the whole Hamilton Broadway play
I
musical.
totally enjoyed it when I went and saw it.
I never saw it live, but I watched it on TV and I listened to the soundtrack. And I think musically is probably one of the greatest musical events.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think he felt very hungry. Those felt like songs that were like destined to be what they were.
and I think to me the story was more than what I thought it would be. It was way different than I thought it would be. But when he came out with that, I think he went to the Obamas, the White House, and did a portion of it.
Yeah.
And I think Michelle, like, what, he told us, Michelle Obama, like, what this is about. And it's founding fathers, but they're actually people of color. And she looked at it and said, good luck with that.
Yeah.
And then I think it went for a year, and it didn't do very well for like a year, and then it caught on fire.
Yeah. And sometimes, and so part of what we're doing when we make things is refining, trying new things. Some things win, some things don't, or fail, succeed. I think you learn really well from your failures. As a matter of fact, I think your failures are probably the most important thing that you have. And so you build on it. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
I think that's just it, right? At that point of failure, because I think maybe not just adjunct failure, but we have Kickstarters that don't perform like we would like.
I'm pretty sure that if you ask the creator honestly, every single one of them would say that Kickstarter did not perform like I really wanted it to. Right? I don't think that's not a. I think that's like a mild. That's kind of like an understatement, right?
Yes.
I've never met somebody who would be like, well, I would have turned down the extra $10,000. I would have just capped it at that level. We're good. Yeah. But no, you're right.
But Zach says, with Kickstarters, we have a funding level, and then we got a number we're really hoping for.
Yes, and I agree with him, right? And there's a little bit of dishonesty there, because they want you to hit that minimum. They want you to set a goal, but you need to set that goal low, because there's an algorithm that drives it, and it's the percentage of funding that drives things. And so then you see people putting out ridiculously low goals. They're like, there's no way you could ever publish that with that much money, that little amount of money. So clearly that's not a realistic goal. You're just trying to take advantage of the algorithms, and heck, why not? Right? Someone's going to let a computer decide how things get shown on a website. I might as well take advantage of it.
I have a crash and burn philosophy with my goals. I've already paid for it before I go to Kickstarter. That's the minimum I will actually go to Kickstarter or actually fulfill. But if it's at that level, I will never ever do that project again.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I did character booklets, these little DCC character booklets. And it didn't, I only had 80 backers, but in the end, I looked at it, I was like, that was a pretty successful product. Kickstarter, because it didn't do as much money as I thought it would do. I thought it would catch on a little better. It didn't. I'd done some advertising, and I had certainly sent out examples of this stuff in advance, and that had kind of bombed on me because people hadn't used them. they'd just been too busy. It was COVID, and they were too busy dealing with the reality and stuff. And but I still had 80 backers, and they love their products. And you know what happens is now I have a big stack of character booklets for myself, which is, I really built it for me, right? Because I'm the one that decided what on all those pages and how they were going to work together and stuff. And so now when I play my weekly game on Saturdays, I have a character booklet for my characters. Or when my players can't find something on their character sheets, I chide them that they haven't used their booklet correctly. And so yeah, so those things exist for a reason, and it was a good exercise, and I don't begrudge the time or the effort. And it paid for a couple thousand books.
Oh no, that's not bad at all. I look at more as, I'm going to do a thing, and if there is at least a certain amount of people interested, I will continue to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. The problem I have is that I'm always buying new equipment. And I buy it out of my Kickstarter funds. And so, I'm always balancing what sits in the bank account and making sure, it's always like, oh, can I get this cast iron vintage thing that I could probably use one day? So that's something that you should you should maybe not get involved with as much. But I'm pretty sure, Jeff, that I've hit the limit. It's as to what I can store and what I can safely use without having a dedicated building for it. So that's it. I think I've bought everything I need to buy.
Well, it looks like there's some room in that room you're at right now, so I think you can probably...
this is my reading room, and so although my daughter's couch is sitting in here right now because she couldn't take it with her when she moved, so there's supposed to be a bookshelf behind me, but it's waiting to be built. Luckily, I hadn't started it when she moved home suddenly and needed space for her couch, because this was the only room we could put it in. So there's always room.
Yes.
I can always find space. This, when I do Zoom meetings, interviews and stuff, I do it here. This is my art desk. And so what you don't see is all the art supplies. And this is the desk that I do product photography at. And, I've got big weights here.
Oh yeah. And you do ironing while you're at it too.
That's right. I can do my ironing. I've been rehabilitating these and painting them because they weigh like 10 pounds each. And so when I'm hand gluing stuff, I can put the weights on top. I got handles on. But so this is where I do all of that. And you know what? They're cooler looking than a paper wrapped brick. Although this is cheaper. So it was 58 cents.
I'm just amazed you can. That's what I find amazing. I can't keep numbers and such in my head, and to remember 58 cents for a brick is pretty stunning.
I don't know why, but it's the thing that sticks in my head. I can remember what I paid for just about everything, right? And so, yeah.
So maybe it's your way of indexing inflation, is how much are bricks?
How much are bricks this year? Oh, 62 cents now. Now we're getting expensive. So yeah.
No, we better talk about your Kickstarter, because you got a Kickstarter going.
I do have a Kickstarter going right now. It's for Tales from the Smoking Wyrm number 9, which may seem odd to some people because I have yet to ship 7, which I have here in my hands, and 8, which I literally delivered to Kickstarter backers. Actually, at the time of this recording, if it hasn't gone to you yet, it will go to you in the next couple of hours, because Brian, who is my partner on uploading things to Drive Through, he is in the process of uploading things right now. And actually, just as we went live, he mentioned that I needed to send him one file. And so as soon as we get off, I'll send it, and then it's going to go out. And all my backers will have issue 8 in PDF, and it's at the printers. And so I should have it back, I think by the end of November. We'll see. I can never tell how backed up a printer is when my product actually gets there to him. So, but yeah, so 7 and 8 are about to go out to backers. That's another Kickstarter that I'm finishing right now. Everything's almost done. And then number 9 is the current Kickstarter, and Tales from the Smoking Wyrm. That's Tales from the Smoking Wyrm 9 and Smoking Wyrm Monograph 2.1. So it's volume 2, number 1. is on that Kickstarter as well, and that is an adventure. It is called Krampus Comes to Boterham, and it is a an open design style game, like more like a sandbox almost, where you have something going on, but players can go in any direction to solve to finish it, and everything. And obviously, because it's Krampus comes to Boterham, you're in Boterham, and Krampus is going to show up.
Ah, okay.
There's no hiding in that title, and everything, but it's really cool because I'm reuniting with John Cobb. As a matter of fact, the very first Smoking Wyrm monograph featured art by John Cobb. Here's a couple of his pieces.
Oh, beautiful.
Troll. My favorite one is, where's he at? Actually, this guy's pretty cool too. Look at that wicked blade on him.
It is.
These are all trolls. Yeah. There is the prophetess, I think, the witch.
It almost makes me think of Elric in a way. I don't know why.
Well, as a matter of fact, he drew Elric for White Wolf, and so the White Wolf covers of the collected Elric of Melman and Benet and everything were drawn by John Cobb.
Oh,
so he's an artist out of the 90s. He was a big White Wolf artist in the 90s, and then fell out of doing products for people. And then I discovered that he was in Louisville, and we started talking. Louisville's about an hour and a half south of me, and he's since moved to Cincinnati. So now he's here, and it's easy to get a hold of him. Well, at least maybe it's easier to get a hold of him. So he's agreed to come back for volume 2, number 1, for Krampus Comes to Boterham, and he will be doing the same type of art, same style of art and everything for the adversary cards. So yeah. So this is it's an adventure, Smoking Wyrm monograph 2.1, but monographs, I design them as a product line to focus in on something and really explore it in depth in a metaphorical way, right? And so it's not always in a mechanistic, like I'm writing in depth about this topic.
Right.
Sometimes it's design and layout. And as a matter of fact, what you see through the previous Kickstarter Smoking Wyrm monograph. So here's the first one, For Whom the Bell Trolls, which is the one that John Cobb worked with me. And then here's the second one. This is The Hangman's Garden, written by Dieter Zimmerman. The first one was written by Jose Luis Cardosa. You'll notice I haven't written any of these. That's not my goal in these for the first couple that I've done. It's I am not the writer. I am the person who is. It's more experience in production design and design and layout, and trying to solve problems. That's the monograph part. I'm trying to solve problems and execute them to solve problems, to create a more elegant design and layout plan for game masters and players. That's the focus of that product. It's got a great adventure, don't get me wrong, and the product will be nice when it's done, but that's because that's what I'm investigating.
So by tying Tales of the Smoking Wyrm, so you are at least your title ties it to it.
Yeah. Oh, not only that, but there is a repetitious piece of art. If you look, there's a little itty bitty smoking worm.
Sure enough.
Right. And it goes up and down in a vertical banner and so this is designed. So you have to remember, I'm an academic. I came from academia. I love academic things. I spend lots of time thinking about books. And one of my favorite form of nonfiction writing is the monograph. Right. And so a monograph is something that really was in its heyday in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, into the 50s and 60s. It's kind of gone out of vogue in everything but zoology for the most part. And so it's where one author does this serious deep dive, as deep as you can get into the weeds, and really explore something as well as they can. And so that's what we're trying to do in terms of, that's my goal with a Smoking Wyrm monograph, is a deep dive into design and layout to produce the better product. Now, the better product has to have good bones, right? And so I work with an author who is producing a really good story, but it also needs other things. It needs flesh on those bones and stuff like that to carry that metaphor forward. And I'm
So
doing,
in a sense, it's separate. I was kind of curious because I've kind of thought, with you've got a brand with the Smoking Wyrm,
I do. And
and
so
you're putting this under the umbrella
of the Smoking Wyrm.
Does it create confusion as far as what that is in relation to the other?
Well, I don't think it creates confusion in terms of Tales from the Smoking Wyrm, which is clearly kind of an anthology, dragon-esque type of product, right? And so if you look at it, there's a menu on the back. This is issue 6. There's a menu on the back, and it's got lots of different topics, and they're all over the place, right? And so I think Tales from the Smoking Wyrm, by the time we came up with the monograph idea, which started with issue 4, and it was kind of sparse for the first year or two. It was, I'm going to do one, and okay, now I've got another one. I've got a third one that I'm doing right now, this volume 2, number 1, and then there'll be one in early January, February timeframe. I've got another one that's coming out with the next Smoking Wyrm. They kind of come hand in hand. I think of them as a paired thing sometimes, especially this one, because issue 9 of Tales from the Smoking Wyrm is seasonally themed. It's not just Christmas, but it's seasonally themed to end of the year celebrations and festivals and stuff. And so it has Krampus as a patron. It has a whole article on the instruments of Krampus, right? The weapons and stuff that Krampus uses. It has something we call patron missions, which are 7 little short missions that you can randomly roll and assign to players as they tap into Krampus's power if they're using Krampus as their patron. And it's that relationship is supposed to be a quid pro quo, and so we're providing lots of little pro quos, right? So that the judge can say, hey, I need you to do this little mission. Krampus is like, I've given you a whole bunch of power, now you need to do something back. And so Krampus kind of grew and outsized the book. And we had a whole bunch of other articles that were just in the end too big. They're going to get pushed to another issue next year. So I write these main articles, or I invite people to write these main articles, and they just develop kind of organically. And one of the things that I have to do to keep everything working, I think, when you're building a book like that, is you need to understand your form factor really well, right? So our form factor is very specific. It's 5 inches by 8 inches. And I know we have a style that goes throughout it in terms of the fonts we use and everything. And I know what the word count on a page is based on those fonts. And so I have Excel spreadsheets where I am constantly moving articles around to get to the optimal word count per issue. So we've got 8 issues under our belt now.
I see. Right.
And I'm constantly thinking, well, which was my favorite issue? Not necessarily in terms of content, but in terms of layout and visual appeal and a balance between the cool visuals and the cool writing and stuff like this. Which one was really well balanced? And if you ask people, they all have different opinions, but I'm the one that writes it and produces it. So it's my opinion that matters at the end of the day. And I have kind of hit in on there's a narrow window of about 2,000 words, which is where I'm trying to hit in a given issue. And then once I go over that, it's between 14 and 16,000 words. Once you go over that, it's too many words. You don't have space to put really big images in it, right? That look big. So if you I don't know, if you look at some of these books, when you have really nice big double page spreads with just a little bit of text on it, it looks very expansive, right? And so you get a lot out of it. Even though it's a small form factor, that's really impressive looking.
Right.
And people really love that. So even with small size, you can get, big rewards and big payoffs in terms of layout and everything. You just have to know how to do it. And so part of what we're doing is we're constantly pushing that. And so I look at issues and I'm like, oh, that issue had a really good balance in terms of visual and word count, right? I thought it felt balanced. It felt like I got some good art in there, but I also got some really good meaty articles. And so that's where it sits, 14 to 16,000. words, gets me about 60 pages of content, which is 2-color, which really means it's 4-color because you're paying for color when you're paying for color.
Yes.
And so, so we try and use color. Everybody who's just listening to this, you've totally missed all the examples that I'm giving Jeff. But because I actually have a stack of Smoking Wyrms here because I was doing video overviews of them the other day. And something I'm behind on, which is, trying to get a repository of videos out there for people who want to investigate them before they buy them. And, kind of get my take on them across.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if it's really helped my Kickstarters, but I just do a flip through for the Kickstarters, and at least everybody knows like what they're getting.
Yep. Well, so I take those and spend 15 to 20 to 30 minutes on them and really go through them. But what I'm doing is I kind of think of it as like a director's cut or a behind the scenes, like MSTK 3000 or whatever, or the director voiceover. And so when I'm talking about the book, I'm telling you what the article is, but I'm also mentioning who the artist is, and we had a good time working with this artist. Or
you're more like the DVD commentary.
Yeah. And so there's a DVD commentary in there that often talks about the production process that is irrelevant to most people, but there are people who definitely appreciate knowing some of those little quirky things, right? So
yeah, and I think for me, and I don't know, and I don't go. I try and keep mine much more limited because I don't think I want to have people's attentions that long for just a flip through on a Kickstarter. But I think what you're doing makes
your
more
product
sense.
line is called RPG Rambling.
Yeah. I try. Yes, I try and yeah, in proper dosage. But I think what you're doing is absolutely smart, because I think it's, to me, what you're doing. I think it's gonna sound kind of weird. I think you are what's wrong? You're repurposing your material. So
Yes.
you are really not doing a flip through. You are creating a series of videos that's something different than what the actual content is. And I think that is definitely different than what I'm looking for what I'm doing. But for what you're doing as standalone videos, I think there's probably a lot of there could see a lot of value in that for engaging people in your content.
Yeah. And and the reason I do them that way is because my favorite part of any literature or movie or anything that I ever deal with is the rare conversation about the product that has the little behind the scenes photographs on how they made R2D2, or what the puppets look like in a Jim Henson production or something. Like, I can distinctly remember reading the Cinefex on 2010, right, and thinking, it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just insane.
So I enjoy podcast. One was I was there too, which he just would interview people who were seconds, or I call them seconds, like backup actors in different movies.
Oh, extras, yeah.
And then there's another one I'm listening to. It's called how what went wrong. They just talk about struggles that people went through, and I find a lot of times that more fascinating than the movie itself. Like the struggles of getting from A to B and knowing how people did it, not just hardship, but like things aren't always a linear path. You think some guy types up a thing, script, movie gets made, it's done. It's like there's a lot more to it than that.
No, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So those are the things that I find enrich the story of the product, right? To know those behind the scenes. And since very few people talk to me about that part, I just decided to produce my own.
Yeah, and I think it also, to me, it really does. I don't want to say brand's not really quite the right word, but it really does. I help engage people in the blind visionary productions. It's so and I think people do enjoy those. Obviously with RPG ramblings, people enjoy apparently the rambling. So I think there are people out there for content. So I think you're right. If it's underserved, and it also provides. It's not directly meant to advertise your product, but it is meant to advertise your product, and it serves more than just a blatant advertisement.
Right. Yes. No, I totally agree. I'm just checking something. Okay. Yeah, and so there's a part of that, especially since kind of maybe part of the message that I'm trying to get across is that a lot of what we do is handmade, and a lot of what we do is made with old equipment that I refurbish, and it's part of the craft process that I really enjoy. And so it's fun to share that stuff with people, like, oh, we did this and I had to renovate this product in order, or this device in order to make this happen. And so there's some good stories in there. Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
even just the fact that you're using revenues from or your profits from your projects to fund the purchasing of equipment to produce things by hand, and being able to do things on your own is a way that I think people find interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's different. It's different than the rest of us. Send a file to mix them. 3 weeks later, we get books. Okay.
Well, and I still send files to Mixums. This is a Mixum publication, right? So
Right.
this issue 6, the previous issue 6 was the actual risographic version, and that was printed by somebody else. But this is a Mixum one, but I left the page blank, and I handmade a sleeve, and I printed these little inserts myself, and everything, and I just glued them straight into the book. And so part of it is understanding what the limitation I have right now is. Okay, I don't have an offset printing press, or I don't have a risographic printing machine. And so I'm not doing a huge amount of printing on my own. Although, I printed this, right? This is actually the character sheet for the Soul Eater class.
Oh, nice.
In issue 7, and no, issue 6. And so, I had an artist do the art, and this is printed on a Canon Image Prograph 1000, similar to that Epson you've got in your back corner, right? And so
Yeah.
it was like, looking at I'm still investigating printing techniques, because that's like the last step in independence. But I'm trying to figure out, is it worth going and getting a vintage offset press, or is it, or do I need to get a letterpress, or do I just need to get a couple of Image Pro graphics and have a print farm, because they're slow, as but they can do a lot. Is there, what am I trying to produce? And,
yeah, then you start it, and it's even the then you start getting into issues like humidity and things like that, and you're going to have to probably start worrying more about climate control to make sure that
everything works right.
Yes, at least consistent.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's for you part of winning.
Yeah. Oh, it is, right? This needs to be, this is my next career. I don't see it as a hobby anymore. It started as a hobby, but when I moved out of academia, this became the thing I was going to do. And so part of the winning is the enjoyment I get from working with my hands and making things. That's why I built a house, right? I wouldn't have built a house or rebuilt a house if I hadn't had some kind of enjoyment in climbing around in the rafters and thinking about minute details that would improve airflow through them and stuff, right? Which took me an entire year with 2 other guys. Every weekend, like 15, 20 hours a weekend. We spent 6-8 months in my rafters thinking about that stuff. So you wouldn't do that if you didn't go, if you didn't enjoy working with your hands. If you don't like production, you shouldn't try it, right? Or you definitely shouldn't commit to it before you've tried it. So yeah. And it's the same thing with people who ship stuff, right? So you rely on World of Game Design to do your shipping, and gosh bless them, they do that for people, and they take a cut, and I totally get that, and that's perfectly acceptable. I ship all my stuff myself. Why? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be mad at someone for having made a mistake and screwed up an expensive order.
Oh,
but if it's me that screws up the expensive order, I can be angry at myself all the time, and I find that acceptable.
What I know is, they are set up for doing it. and they have a system for doing it. And I also know my personality. I am a very, I don't know if mercurial is the right word, but I am definitely I'm not a systematic person. Details kill me. And I've double, in fact, this is his last Kickstarter. I actually double shipped to people.
Yeah. So just how I remember that this brick cost 58 cents.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, those details stick in my brain and I just can recall them. And so, and I have a computer that helps me because we keep meticulous notes in Excel spreadsheets of who we've shipped to and when we've shipped them. And here are all the tracking numbers and everything. So that if somebody asks where I had someone who out of the blue from a Kickstarter that I finished 2 years ago asked me, when did this ship and when did it arrive at my house? And I was able to tell them that. So,
well, the nice thing for me is the overseas orders I do with Lulu, it sends me an email.
Yeah.
I have them go to a file, a folder on Gmail, and I can search it.
Yep.
I'm good about setting up systems for that, but just typing in an address every single time or copying and pasting.
Oh, that would drive me nuts. That's why we have spreadsheets.
Right. Well, yes, but also spreadsheets I've found, because I love spreadsheets, and I'm not a macro person, but as far as formulas and setting up complex spreadsheets, I love it. But you can do so much damage so quickly with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Not even know it.
Yeah. So those are the projects I'm working on. The interesting thing about the Krampus Comes to Kost-Butterham, for anybody who's interested, is in the previous Smoking Wyrms, we tried a command view layout, which is everything that you need is on a page. How do you balance that in a small product? One of the ways you balance it is by introducing a new form, reintroducing a form of grammar that was used in the 12th century called manicules. I use them extensively. They're little finger pointing devices. And if you happen to have any of my previous products, you will find them all over the place, and they point to the page number or the area that is important for that product, and that references it, so it connects things together. So as a judge, it's a call out. Oh, this is something that was on another page that I may need to think about. But you need that design visual cue to click your recognition. And it's better than bolding because you bold for other reasons. So there's a whole series of design thought that goes into that layout. Art, player facing versus judge facing. The cards are one way to get at that. There in these projects, there are no single pieces of art that are produced that are not intended for a specific audience. So maps are intended for judges. Adversary cards are intended for players and things like this, and there's no like art that's hidden in the book that players can't see, right? It's intended to be seen. The thing that I hate about role-playing games, everybody does it, adventures, is when the cover art spoils what the module's about. I don't like that, which is why I have non-spoiler covers, right?
Yeah.
And so, I try and make them as plain as they can. That if you look at the Krampus Comes to Kost-Butterham, there's this Krampus's face in amongst a standard format that is designed to stand out from most books because they're so starkly white and different. And then you actually got to play test with me scrap metal for Earthcrawl when we were at Gamehole Con. And the thing that I introduced there that will also be in Krampus Comes to Kost-Butterham is sensory cue cards. And this is a way to in a limited form factor. Space is a big deal. One of the things that you always have in descriptions of printed products is something the judge needs to read or paraphrase to the players, a description usually, right? We call it box text if you're out of the GA and everything. And I can remember playing in the RPGA, and box text was sacrosanct. If you interrupted box text, you would get in trouble. And if nobody could act before the box text was finished and stuff like this. But box text could go on for, sometimes it was a page long, right? Paragraphs. And you know what happens is when when you stand up, and unless it's a poem, right? I stand up and talk to you guys and recite something to you. By the third or fourth line, you've lost it. It's hard to keep all those little details that are important. And then the judge is like, hey, I told you about that. That was in the box text. And you're like, well, I don't remember the box text. And so one solution to that is to pull things out of the box text and give it to them in cards, and make that more immersive and interactive is the goal. And so the goal with sensory cue cards is I give a short description, and then in Dungeon Crawl Classics we have a luck check, but there's many other systems that have similar things. And you could do a luck check or a perception check or something like that. And then if the people make their luck check, they get to pick a card. It's, literally they're randomized, so you never know who's getting what. And those cards represent pieces of information that could be true things. They're things that you really hear or see or taste or feel. Or they could be, things like, oh, I'm preoccupied, my suit's really itchy and I'm not really paying much attention. Or they could be red herrings. There could be any numerous thing, right? And sometimes they require dice rolls for you to make a luck save or a will save or something like this, and everything. So, but you read something out to people, then they get to process a little bit of additional information, which means they're connecting it back to what you just said. And then they get to interact with each other if they choose so. And so the goal of that product is to draw players into the narrative, make them a part of revealing that narrative, so they feel like, they feel like they're important, and mentally they're engaged. And then also to be able to produce emotions in them. So some of them, not the ones that we did in Scrap Metal per se, but some of them I've written for other adventures they're meant to ratchet up tension, or they're meant to be kind of scary, or they're meant to be, I did a playtest with one, and it's called House of the Petrified Frog. It's a product I've been working on and will finally, hopefully, come out next year. And I had someone playtest it kind of de novo. They didn't know anything about it, but it had these sensory cue cards. I sent them off to them, and they had a physical deck they could play with their friends with. And he came back and he said, well, they weren't earth-shattering, but everybody got really tense because it kept them on their toes. They weren't sure what they were experiencing. And it was like the early stages of a horror movie where something drops and you can't tell what it is, or maybe something went past your vision in the corner of your eye, you saw a shadow. He's like, all these little things kept happening and it really kept us on our toes. He's like, so I don't know if that's a success or not. I'm like, that's exactly a success, because that's exactly what I was hoping to produce, right? And Scrap Metal had a different feel. It's a post-apocalyptic future, and it's supposed to be about the drudgery of that. But that's the sensory cue card system is a new system this will be the first time I've got a published product with it. And I think it'll change the way people view those encounters. So I don't know, what was your experience, Jeff? Was it in any way useful for you when you sat at the table, or was it
the sensory cards?
Yeah, and be honest. If you thought they were cumbersome, I'm sure there are people out there who think that.
I think the problem is, I hate to say this, but I think I probably need to play it again, thinking along those lines, because I wasn't getting those. I wasn't thinking them as being those, and so I wasn't in a headspace to really analyze that.
But what was your experience with them? Was it positive, do you think?
Yeah, it was. Let me try to think, because some of them were encounters, right? Were those the ones that were also encounters as well?
They could be encounters, right? But they were, as you went through regions, you made checks, and I handed you cards with the information on it.
And so the information could be sensory, or it could be an encounter.
Yep, it could be an encounter, right? So sometimes they were like sinkholes open below you when you fall through, because it's a DCC funnel and random stuff happens.
Yeah. So I think the randomization was good. I think what we mentioned before, I think it was, I was trying to think about what things were sensory, because I think there was something to do with like a sweet smell or things like that. But was it tied to a particular? And it was tied to a particular area, right?
It was, yes, yeah. They were area. sensory cards. So this was as you're going through this area, and if people are telling each other what they're experiencing, each area kind of feels a little different. So
I would say that I think this is kind of weird. I almost wonder is if whatever the sensory cards are, people can't speak what those are, but they have to role play it in a way. Because we all kind of shared new.
yeah,
It'd be kind of interesting is like, you smell something or off, maybe you don't everybody share at the end, but if somebody would just say, I don't really want to go there. There's something about that, it just doesn't smell right. I
yeah,
think that would probably be more because I think we end up just sharing the information. Where I think before, if people can't share it directly or at all, like do not share this, I think that probably could lead to more, maybe more tension with knowledge.
it could. And so it depends on what you're trying to get across with those sensory cue cards. Like I said, you can, what it allows you to do is kind of, as a writer, force the interaction between the judge and the players, right? And kind of put a little bit of umbrage on the players in terms of crafting a narrative. And it is emergent because it's random, because you never know which cards are going to get pulled in what order.
Yeah.
And because it's on a die roll, you never know how many people are going to actually succeed at that die roll. You kind of have
Yeah,
it.
and I think as a system, so as a system for generating random events, I think it worked out really decent. But as far as like the senses becoming part of the actual experience, I'm not sure if it did.
Yeah. And that may be con play, right? So there's a difference between con play and home play.
It very well could be.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's what that product looks like. Is it will for the first time get out there in the world. I mean, you never know until you produce these things how they're going to actually play out.
Well, and I think that was interesting because you wrote this thing. You wrote all your tables, you wrote all these cards, and then you ran, was it 4 games?
3 games there, 1 game at Gen Con. Yeah, so I run
Yeah.
it about 5 times now.
So then what happens is you have the thing in your head, it meets reality.
Yeah.
And then, we all like to think we're clever enough to write things that cover all the bases, but then really when it hits the reality, it's like it's a different story. So then you're able to get feedback from
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we do playtesting, right? So the very
Yeah.
first time I ran scrap metal, we got out there and I was with my group. It was with my home group on a Saturday, and they got into a region. They were doing some stuff, and I immediately said, "Stop! I understand that I have totally written this wrong." Right? I mean, I now understand where this is not working, and it's a fundamental thing. There's no point in going on. I just need to go back and rewrite the guts of this, the mechanic on how we're going to do this and everything. I had made something that looked good on paper, but it was way too complicated for execution. And I was the one executing it, and I was the one that had written it. And I was like, no, this is not the way to do this. And so, but I stopped. I got their feedback. I made notes immediately. Went back and completely rewrote that part. Didn't need to rewrite too much of the actual little area notes because it was the central mechanic that was running the adventure that was the problem. And so now I've had 4 play tests under that, and it's so much smoother.
So I guess my question for you more so is because I've not written anything that needed playtesting so far. So I guess the question is, I mean, your approach to that, I mean, and in the methodology you use. So like, and that's what I'm interested in. Okay, so you have a product, you wrote it, and you're like, I need to play test this. It's not as established adventure, it's more sandbox, and it's going to randomly generate, what we're dealing with. Like, I guess how'd you prepare to go to a play test with this product?
Well, other than the physical production of the things I needed, because these are physical props you're handing out, we're in person, there really wasn't much, right? I just listed it at a con and said I'm doing this, and then I advertised it a little bit when I noticed it wasn't.
So did you already like in your mind come up with like certain things that were key to test, or like some things you're more comfortable with, or were you
Oh,
kicking
there's
the tire?
always so there's my interpretation of what's happening, and then there's the player's interpretation of what's happening. And from the player perspective, I only want to know two things. What do they enjoy and what do they not enjoy? Right. And so really, I don't want to get any more complicated than that, because the truth is, especially in like scrap metal, where there were 5 areas you could go, it was an open thing. You could go to any of those 5 areas, although you had to get through one to get to the 5th one. You could do this in any order you wanted to, and it wasn't going to be a big problem. It was designed to allow people to, every single one of those that I ran have been different. People have always gone to different areas and encountered things in different orders. And every single one of them is unique in and of themselves. So to me, from my perspective, first of all, that's a success, right? Something is not driving people to one place and one place only.
Right.
If I had built a whole bunch of variation and then nobody was using it, they were just doing one thing and always doing the same thing, that would tell me that something is driving that decision process, because that looks more like direction than the random setting that I have put together, where people have a choice and it just doesn't matter which way you go, to be honest.
Yeah, if you put a spider, people won't go there no matter what.
That's right. And so yeah, and as a matter of fact, that's one of the cards, right?
Yeah.
You got that one where it was like there were big giant spider webs high up in trees, and nobody goes through the area with the spider webs. Even though I don't have a single spider in the game, there's just spider webs up there. That's what it looks like. And nobody goes through that area. It's an immediate dead end. Nobody's like, let's go mess with the spiders, right? And they don't do that. And so one thing I do know is that card is very good at having people avoid that area of the map. So from my perspective, I'm looking for certain things. Do I think playing out the cards was cumbersome? Do I think it took a lot of time? Do I think it took too much time? Did it add to player interaction? Did the players feel like they were being drip fed information, or do they feel like they were actually getting things and things were going well? It wasn't at your table, but at several other tables, I've had about 2 hours into it, I've had people go, this is so different than what I normally experience at a con. This is just really awesome. I love these cards. So when I've got people who are volunteering in the middle of a game that they really like the mechanic, that tells me that at least for a subpopulation, this is really hitting home.
Yeah.
Right. And stuff like that. So I'm constantly thinking about all the things that I'm evaluating the game progression as a judge, right? Is this running well? Is it running smoothly? Am I hitting problems where I don't know how to solve them? Or where I don't give advice on how to solve them, right? And maybe that's the problem. I'm hitting the same problem again and again. I should probably give advice on how to deal with that. Excuse me. And so I'm asking myself a whole bunch of questions. The only thing I ask from players is, what did you like? What did you not like? What were the things that got in the way of you having fun? What were the things that you thought,
Yeah, I've heard people say you should never get from players how to fix a problem. They just need to state there is a problem. Or they feel there's a problem.
Right. And because the moment they start thinking about how to fix a problem, they're prejudicing their understanding of the moment. And what they don't know is whether that is an atypical playtest or a typical playtest, right? Is this something that happened in the playtest where I flubbed it at the beginning, and maybe I know I flubbed it, and that totally colors the way people see it?
Yeah.
Or is there something else going on? And
so I have a favorite mechanic in all the world, and I could apply it to any game. And for me, just to say, you know what, I think what you need to do is apply this mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, wait a minute. That's it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Thank you for your advice, but no,
no, that's not how we're going to do it. So, yep. Yeah. So that's kind of how playtesting works for me. It's different than other people, I'm sure, but that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you're doing because you're doing a non-linear and random. I'm sure that creates. Really, a dungeon is so. I don't say so simple, but it's it's a constrained point to point.
Yes.
So that simplifies so much because it limits decisions that people can make or choices that people can make. But we're out in the middle,
Realistically, yeah.
huh?
I said realistically it does, right? Few people decide they're going to enter the castle by knocking down the wall.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Most people just use the door.
Exactly.
See.
And
So
so, but I think, your issue is that the system wasn't just mechanical. I mean, not mechanical, but just like it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to create a new fighter class. Let's try them out. It was actually saying, if this random generation doesn't work, at least most of the time, like 90% of the time or 95% of the time, I've just created a problem that nobody's gonna. It's going to be a big, very big problem
yeah,
because you're going to need a pretty reasonable success rate for people to be able to play it and have it be usable.
yeah.
Because 75% of the time it's usable, that's not good.
No, no. And so what I took out of the playtest, that series of playtests was, oh, I think it was Saturday afternoon after I'd finished the last one, which was you were in that one, is we went out and we had lunch, and I had two friends who'd come to the convention with me, and we sat there, and they had sat in on playtests earlier, the very early playtest, that the one that I said, this is just not working. Let's ditch this and let me ask some questions about other things. They had said on that, and so we sat there, and I made a list of in my notebook. I made a list of things that I needed to change, and then I executed those changes, and I'm extremely happy with them now.
I was just impressed that you've got groupies. And
That's
they
just
may be
about
small in number, but they'll travel states
the
just to
travel
come play in
state.
your game.
Yeah, well, you know how it is. I mean, these are the guys that I played with in high school, so they were looking to get out and get away from home for a little while, and they had never been to a game convention before ever, and so yeah. Now we're planning a trip to England next year, so they're gonna go with. They've never been to England, and I've been there many times, and so we're gonna go to England, and I'm going to do a whole bunch of fact finding for future projects, and we're going to go do things together.
Maybe you need to start a business. You'd be like a travel guide.
Travel guide. That's
Yeah,
right.
you'd be travel England with Trevor, and then
Traveling.
you'll set the itinerary and do
Yep.
some things and charge everybody an extra $1,000 just for you to.
For all of my time.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Maybe that's my true calling. It's not really zines. It's travel. That would be fun.
There's a manager. His name was Ruben, and it's from Mexico. And as far as manager go, it was so. But my goodness, I would pay money for him to take me to New York or New York City. I mean, he was just that kind of personality, like,
Yep.
Like a lot of gusto, very vibrant. And it's like, so it's like, maybe that'd be your calling. You can go,
that would be cool. So, yeah. So that's what I've been up to, Jeff. It's actually been a long postmortem since GameholeCon, making corrections to things, getting products ready, getting this Kickstarter ready, and outlining goals for next year. So,
yeah, it's not easy, especially when you're doing a lot of that, and also yourself too. So, fortunately for me, so far, most of the projects I've gotten to being able to get a lot of people to write and then being able to publish. So that's easy, but there's some things coming out that's going to take a little bit more thought.
yeah.
It's like, okay. So myself, I'm going to be looking at playtesting and so forth. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I playtested House the Petrified Frog for 2 years before I was happy with it. Did it hit the sweet spot I was looking for? That it was navigable, but it was also dangerous. That was the goal for that sandbox set piece, and it's going to launch a whole new series of products, a product line for me that'll be different from the Smoking Wyrm. It'll be a separate item called Sandbox Set Pieces, and then the second one in that line will be Earthcrawl. And so that is like the ultimate of sandbox set pieces. It is a setting with a whole bunch of additional adventures and stuff. So it looks like it's going to come out with two big adventures, one of them being scrap metal, the other one being one called Human Bait, I think is what the name is right now. And then it's going to have an anthology as well, and they're all going to be box sets because they need to. Once you get into that many sensory cue cards and stuff, it's better just to have a box to throw everything in. So suddenly that becomes interesting in logistics.
I guess the question is, could those sensory cue cards be usable for other games for GM?
Possibly, I don't know. You know, the adversary cards certainly are, right? Because you can just pull one out and take it to another setting or whatever you want to do with it. I think the sensory cue cards are pretty tied to what I wrote, but I mean, I'm sure I am coming out with a Smoking Wyrm article where I talk about, I actually got Joseph Goodman's permission to take one of his most famous modules, Sailors in the Starless Sea, and there's an opening sequence where the peasants are marching up to the ruined castle, and they're attacked by these vine creatures. And the box text on that's actually pretty long, and I'm going to take that box text and quote it, and then I'm going to take it apart and show people this is how I would take this bigger piece of box text and make my own set of sensory cue cards off of it, as a kind of a how to go ahead and take apart existing modules and rewrite them if you want to integrate sensory cue cards.
Well, but the thing is it was tied to yours, but you still have like it's tied to creatures, like, and it's tied to other things. I mean, and you could tie it to, because the locations that you had were they were, I don't want to say thematic, but you know, like an area where there were certain types of ruins, another place with certain types of ruins. There's a crater. I mean, you could probably do a little booklet and a stack of cards. You know, I don't know. Maybe that would just go for just a normal run. Somebody running a Mutant Crawl Classics.
Yeah, maybe you could lift a crater and say, I'm just going to lift this part of this piece.
Yes.
It's got the theme cards, or the sensory cue cards to go with it. Yeah. So I guess they are usable. I mean, I've taken apart adventures before and said, I'm just going to use this. I just want to use the castle, right?
Yeah.
The rest of it. So yeah, in that way there are.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess we're hitting 2 hours, aren't we?
We are exactly at 2 hours.
Wow.
We're pretty close to it.
We haven't lost the knack for a ramble.
See, it all comes back.
It all comes back.
Yep.
So anyway, you got a Kickstarter that's going to be going on. I think you're only doing it for what, 2 weeks?
3 weeks?
3 weeks.
We're
so
basically 2 more weekend. It's got 2 more weeks.
Yeah. It's going strong. It's already funded. It's chugging along.
Yep. I'm looking forward to seeing where we get to, and getting these will be the last 2 products that I work on for the year. So, well, that I publish. I don't think they'll get out by the year, but they will get to printing or something. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
I actually, one of the things that I've had to do is learn to push my deadlines out further than I really, when my first gut feeling is, Trevor, you could do this by blah. Then I'm like, no, Trevor can't do it by blah. Trevor needs 2 or 3 more months than blah. And
so for you, it's like plumbing. You think that plumbing, I should get it done in 3 or 4 hours, and then 3 or 4 trips to the hardware store later.
Right.
You finally got all the stuff you need.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so this time this Kickstarter is set to be fulfilled by March of next year, simply because I said I can have it done by January. And then I was like, I should add 2 more months because I can never get it done by the date that I say I'm going to get it done by. You know, my feeling is that I give copious updates, and some of my Kickstarters have 30 and 40 updates on them. And, you know, I have even a little graphic. It's not really a graphic, but it's a very specific leaderboard that tells people, here's what we're going to produce and here's where we're at on that production.
No, I think as long as you communicate, it's good. And there was a peer of ours that was called out for being one of the people that doesn't communicate. And then when I looked through their Kickstarters, I couldn't see what the person was having a big to do about. Like, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, unless the guy thought, because he stated like the Kickstarter is not going to be fulfilled for like 9 months.
Yeah.
You know, like, what is he expecting this guy to update every 2 weeks for
Yep.
9 months? Like,
I try every month. I think a once a month thing, because there's usually 1 or 2 months in there where it's like nothing's really happening. I mean, we're waiting for art to come in. Art comes in, we evaluate it, we put it in layout, make sure it looks good. We ask for a tweak. I mean, what does that mean? And to somebody, most people don't even realize what we're doing. And
no.
so I do sometimes put in little tutorials. Hey, here's the initial sketch, and here's our second sketch, and you notice we changed some things, and here's what it finally looked like, and then here's what it looks like with color, right? And so they can see that and kind of give that background. So sometimes I'm really just doing behind the scenes updates. This is the meat of it, but here's your update. Maybe 1 or 2 things on that leaderboard have changed.
Yeah, and I think as people know up front, I think you've also established yourself after these many Kickstarters that
I try.
People trust.
Yeah.
I don't have the I think for me to be going that far out would absolutely stress me out to the max. I couldn't do it.
What stresses me out is when we miss internal deadlines that I don't announce. Actually, the thing that stresses me out the most is, oh, I needed that by this. And because when I'm getting things back from people, I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day, one of my authors who's worked with me. And I was like, you need to understand that your part in the production is this. I'm not saying it's insignificant. It's absolutely vital, because the written piece is what we're trying to communicate after all. But it's the production pipeline for a product.
Yes.
Takes over a year, right? I began working on issue 9 over a year ago.
Wow.
Most of it was written by December of last year, right? And I'm just now getting it out in a Kickstarter. So especially when you've got a numbered series of things, what I've discovered is you're constantly, like I said, shuffling things and putting them in a pipeline, and then they're sitting there. And I'm like, but the problem is like my editor, I can only get my editor's time once every quarter, right? I can get 30,000 words or 60,000 words every quarter. And so she works 4 months out. And so, when she finishes a project of mine, I'm like, okay, next project, I'm going to have 40,000 words for you in 4 months. How's April? And she's like, oh, April's good, or April's bad. We need to push it to May, right? And I'm like, so these things have to happen well in advance, because I can't go to layout until my editor's done. And so I have to have the writing finished, and then the writing is going to sit there, and maybe I do little tweaks to it, but it's substantively done. And then it goes to edits, and then those things, that's a whole process. We've built, I've gotten really good at the logistics of putting together products, and it takes me a year, minimum of a year, to put together a Smoking Wyrm. So
yeah, that's quite astounding.
Yeah. Well, especially when you think I'm also working in entire new product lines and everything. And I don't imagine this is any different than like Levi Combs does, right? So when, but yeah, that's just how it is. I kind of really enjoy it, because I like seeing all these projects at different stages, and then when they get done and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then it's a weird letdown when I get the physical thing in my hand most of the time, and I'm like, oh, it's amazing. And then the next day I don't have that, right? because you only get that feeling once, and then you're like, okay, well, it's done, and I'm moving on to the next thing. My focus, actually, many months ago, my focus was on the product after this. This is just but then the moment comes when I get to pull it off my shelf and use it in my own game, and that's a really great feeling.
So, oh yeah.
Okay, so I just rambled a bit for you.
Well, that's okay. You're the fine craftsman. I'm the
Well, you craft good products. I thought that Scoundrels was really nicely done.
Those I can usually crank out in about 3 months.
Yeah.
And same with Gary's Appendix. But then it took me a while to get the layout figured out. Once I got that snapped into place, the rest went well. But I've also had somebody writing for me, so I keep the art limited because it costs so much money.
It does. It does. Oh my gosh. Art is not cheap. Anybody who tells you otherwise, I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. So,
Bless 'em.
and I've got Adam Kovac wrote issue 2, and
Yeah.
he does such a smash up job, but he's able to devote. So, and even to Gary's appendix, I usually can go from a call to writing to a Kickstarter with a proof copy in hand in about 3 months as well.
Wow, I wish I could do that.
Well, it's a lot less stress, but I also don't have the I don't have the production values, and I don't have the cards and the envelopes, and so that's what I'm giving up, is the boutique, the what do they call that? Not
Bespoke.
boutique, bespoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And and you have to remember, my wife asked me, why is it that you spend hours gluing things? And I'm like, well, first of all, I do spend hours gluing things. Let's just admit it. But I'm always listening to a book on tape, and I'm thinking about products while I do it. And so, and by the way, if you're not good at gluing things, you could not be a bookbinder, because bookbinding is 90% glue, right?
yeah.
And manipulating glue and dealing with dried glue and all this stuff, right? And so, so it's good practice. And I'm like, it's good practice. Sitting down and saying, I need to do 400 of that. And I know that each one takes me 30 seconds. So I'm going to work in batches and everything and press them and do all this stuff, right? That's good practice.
Or maybe it's just ADD and you're able to hyper focus on something.
No, I don't think it's it at all, because I'm always thinking about other things while I'm doing it. I have always been able to do I love working with my hands.
But I would say but here's what I would say. That's why I may think, I think walking in the woods, listening to podcasts, my head goes way off into outer space. But there's the physical activity. I still think you're probably getting to a Zen focusing state by doing the repetitious tasks, and somehow it relaxes you and allows your mind to do other things.
But, it definitely relaxes.
But to glue in piece after piece after piece after piece after piece, it's more than practice, Trevor.
Yeah.
You're saying there is something about this activity that just triggers the whatever those receptors are. It gives you the boost. There's something that you find
it feels like
about that.
It feels like childhood. When I was in 10th grade, I took a graphic design class, and we had a printing press, and we had a dark room, and we had we did t-shirts, and we had a Mac too, right? And we did all of these things, right? And so it takes me right back to being 15 and working on stuff. And yet it's still, I wouldn't say it's super lucrative at the phase that I'm in, but it does pay for the equipment, and I've basically paid for the equipment I need right now. And now it's going to start adding money to paying bills and stuff, I think, in the new year.
But you also love the activity.
And I love the activity, and it keeps me busy, and it's varied. Every day is different, right? Some days I'm working on packing, some days I'm working on production, some days I'm writing, some days I'm doing research, some days I'm refurbishing equipment, some days I do all of that. And so I think variety is the spice of life in many respects, and being able to do all that stuff is good. But I think you're right. I think we're hitting the time space continuum, and we probably need to clip this, and we can come back to it sometime soon.
I'm sure we will. So anyway, thanks again, Trevor, and everybody needs to go see the Kickstarter.
Yep.
And
check it out, guys.
If you're hearing this months later, there'll be Tale of the Smoking Wyrm 10 coming out. So
it will be, and it's going to be great, because I've already got it written, and I know what's in it. So, actually, I'm looking forward to 10. It's going to be a cool issue. So
I believe it. So
that's
anyway, thanks again for coming on, Trevor.
Not a problem, Jeff. Anytime.